Hello everybody and welcome to Season 3 of Some Patches Required. It's taken a little bit of time to get back to you, but we are ready to educate and hopefully entertain you on the ever-turbulent games industry. My name remains Aaron, and I am one of your hosts.
And I'm your other host, Zach.
And as always, before we get into, dare we hope, the fun of the episode, obviously a huge thank you to anybody who's stuck around with us this long. I know we're not nearly as long-running or consistent as some other podcasts, but it means a lot that you would have stuck it out with us. And of course, new listeners, thank you for tuning in. New start of a new season, probably a good time, at least as good a time as any to hop on. So thank you to all in attendance to this fantastic lecture series, which is not at all what the show is. But in addition to that, if all of you listening would not mind too terribly following us on your preferred social media platforms, regardless of how terribly destabilized or destabilizing they may be, do feel free to follow us on X, nay, Twitter, the Facebooks. We cross-publish on YouTube and on your favorite podcatcher, so feel free to share the show with a friend. Anything helps. And now I suppose that the homework's out of the way, we can greet you proper with a real topic.
Yeah, I also just want to comment, I think I mentioned this to you, Aaron, that like one of our most popular months was when we were on break, which I think is hilarious. So like apparently we just had to stop making content in order for people to start downloading our episodes. So
it's hard to miss us if we're always there.
Yeah, I guess. You know, the heart longs for what it can no longer have.
So our millions and millions of listeners ballooned into billions during our absence.
Well, the fun thing is during our absence, the games industry blew up. Quite a bit.
We fucking missed everything.
Yeah. We literally went on break and we're like, well, we're gonna go on break and work on some of the stuff that we wanted to work on because there's not that much going on. And then the games industry's like, how about mass layoffs and like mass leaks and a bunch of other shit? And I'm like, okay,
acquisitions
cool.
going through. Bobby Kotick leaving.
Yeah. Panera killing people with their lemonade. That wasn't in the games industry, but it did happen. You should look it up.
It's rough times. Yeah, but no, we are woefully aware of the fact that it was a very bad period to not be talking about current events, especially with our focus on what's actually going on the human side of things, the work side of things. But we're gonna dive back in as best we can and probably end up collecting some of the pieces of missed topics along the way.
Yep. And one of those missed topics, at least kind of, is what we're going to be talking about today, which is pay to play early, which would be convenient to call early access if there was not something on Steam called early access, which is not the same thing as what we're about to talk about. But we're also going to talk about early access today. So anyway, TLDR, I'm a big WoW fan. You probably know that if you've been listening. Certainly Aaron knows that. And the War Within... Oh, did you say what? Like you didn't know? Yeah. Oh. Huh.
Wheels of Wellness, right?
The new expansion for World of Warcraft, Wheels of Wellness.
I thought WoW stood for Wheels of Wellness. I thought it was like a volunteer thing.
That does sound like, I was about to say, is the next World of Warcraft expansion about community service?
Hey, man, I'd be just as likely to play it.
Yeah, I guess that is fair. I mean, it would help eliminate some of that famous WoW toxicity and shitty political opinions. But regardless,
I'm sure it wouldn't.
You think it'd become like a toxicity simulator for like beating up the homeless and people in need?
I'm sure it would.
No, that's GTA RP servers, which also have blown up since we've been gone. Hello, No Pixel. Anyway. To the actual topic, War Within came out, or was announced rather, and one of the things that comes with it in like the Uber Deluxe version It might be called the Epic version. I took notes on this, so I should be able
Cool.
to just tell you. 1 second. It is the Epic Edition, which is $90. It has 3 days early access. You can access the game 3 days early from the official launch if you buy this pre-order deluxe edition, basically. And anyway, we've got a lot of opinions on how shitty this is, and this trend just being a thing in games lately. But we want to talk a little bit about that, the pros and cons. Spoiler alert, it's mostly bullshit for that. And also, how does that relate to early access on Steam? And what are some of the pros and cons and differences there? So anyway, I'll shut up for a second so Aaron can, talk about how much of a fanboy he is of paying money for a pre-order to get access to a game early. Aaron, why do you love paying money to get access to a game early?
Well, I love spending money on nothing. I love it. It's it feels good because I know that money is going directly to the developers and not to executives.
Oh, is that where like the extra $30 I'm paying from the base game for WoW is going?
Directly to the developers. It's given
Damn.
to them in stocks and bonds and sometimes cash.
If only.
If only. No, it's fucking the dumbest. I'm an intellectual, you see, and I say smart things like it's fucking the dumbest thing. It is purposefully confusing terminology and it's manipulation at its like most transparent. And I guess it's just normal now because it's in a ton of AAA releases. It does confuse the early access side of things because you are paying to get access to something early. But to strip it down to like the base reason that this is a ridiculous idea, among many reasons that this is a ridiculous idea, is it is completely manufactured value, right? This is nothing more or less than publishers at publicly traded companies looking at ways to make as much money as possible. One of them being essentially delaying the full release of the game so that a select few people with fat enough wallets can pay to play it on launch day.
Yeah.
You're not playing it early, you're playing it at launch day and everyone else is getting to it a couple of days later. If the game is publicly available for purchase, the fucking game has launched.
Yeah, pay to play on time is how it is.
You save to play on time. But you don't save because you're still paying full price for the game.
Yeah. No, it's absolutely ridiculous. I mean, I know you're aware of this, but and we've talked about this. So this is more of a comment for our dear listeners, but our dear listeners, I don't think I enunciated that well enough. But regardless, it's just a scam to get more pre-orders because if you remember, I feel like pre-orders back in the day were not necessarily as like negatively viewed. I mean, maybe they were and I was too young to realize it, but I feel like when we entered this era of games, especially AAA games, being much more of like a shot in the dark in terms of like, am I going to buy the next game of the year or the next big pile of shit released by Bethesda? Like, the minute that it became a coin flip as to which we were getting, I feel like a lot of people suddenly were like, okay, do not pre-order a game. Don't waste your money. Wait for reviews. Be patient, basically, right? And this is just the new scam that's there, like you said, to create artificial value for people and get them to pre-order, right? Like, that's all it is. And I feel like it's pretty transparently, like, that's what's going on for the most part. I mean, they do sometimes add in these like dumb bullshit, cosmetics and da-di-da-di-da. But like most of the time, I feel like you don't pre-order for that stuff. At least if you're, if you've got an option between like two different things, you're looking at like this WoW Deluxe Edition, right? Or Epic Edition rather. And it's got all these like bells and whistles on it. Although I will say some of them are actually pretty fucking cool. So I actually did pre-order for one of the things that was cosmetic. But really you're buying this like Epic Edition because you want the early access to the game, or rather you want to play the game on time with everyone else, which is an especially big deal when you're talking about like these competitive online games where you do have a benefit of being there day one. Not to mention all of this feeds into FOMO.
Yeah,
and all
yeah,
that
in a major
bullshit.
way.
What's also crazy because you know, I actually didn't know about this one until you brought it up, and then of course I've read the article on it. But you mentioned the Deus Ex Human Revolution,
Yes.
like the augment your pre-order crap that happened with that.
Yeah, which was
It's a
kind of a
single-player game.
wild idea.
Oh well, yeah. I mean, that was even wilder than like this because it was like how many people pre-order the game is going to impact whether you get access to the game early or whatever.
Yeah,
But
so for those of anyone listening who does not know what we're talking about, because I had completely forgotten about it, when the game Deus Ex Human Revolution, which came out in what, 2012?
Did I write down the date for it?
I did at some
point. It was like
point.
14 or something, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was in the
a while ago.
mid-20 teens. It was in the 20 teens. And there was this bonkers publicity stunt that they pulled where
2011.
they basically 2011.
Yep.
Where they said to the community, if we can hit X number of pre-orders, we'll release the game early, which doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. And the community said, well, that doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. And Square Enix is very glad that people don't remember that anymore. But it's a very similar concept in theory, is like, let's really try and juice these pre-orders, which are a great way to get full price for a game, a great way to bypass the used market for publishers, and offer very little of value to consumers, generally speaking. Let's juice these pre-orders with this, and, you know, we'll be able to pocket a bunch up front. Which I guess is, I'll at least give them creativity points.
Well, it's
that's a
interesting you
weird enough
mentioned-
idea.
You mentioned the creativity because in one of the articles that we went through, it was talking about how all of this is just marketing.
Oh yeah, it's exclusively marketing.
Yeah, they sell it like it's a change to how development happens. Like the way that they talk about it is as if it's not a marketing thing. Because if you think about it, it's like, okay, if you can play the game early access, then the game is ready. And if a bunch of people, because presumably, right, like you're playing this game early access because you paid money for the pre-order. But like there's no limit to how many people they can fit on that day one.
Right.
And
the
by day
servers
one,
are
I
up.
mean the early access day one, not the actual day one. So the game's out. Like it's not early access. You're just like, there's no reason there's no like technical reason to limit how many people can play based on like paying.
No, it's
just marketing.
The idea that this is even in like the same realm of thought as something like a closed beta or like an open alpha test or something like that, completely different ideas. Completely different ideas, because those literally are development tools. They can also be marketed as hype tools, for sure. But they are development tools. This is not a development tool. This is someone sitting down and thinking laterally and coming up with a way to generate a need for something that isn't lacking.
Yeah, I mean it's just really stupid.
It is. I mean,
yeah,
it's not even that. Here's the thing: if I was like a mustache twirling depiction of it, what?
I said executive.
Yeah. If I was like a caricature executive, this is a great idea. Like, it doesn't. We're not going to lose money necessarily if people don't do it for the $70. If they'll just still pay us $70 for the game. And they won't do that. But if someone wants to pay $109 for, you know, some cool basketball shorts and to play the game 5 days early, then why should we not give that to them? Everyone else will still have the same experience later. Like, from that perspective, it actually is quite clever. The problem is it's just so, they forgot to, normally good marketing adds a veneer of like distracting positivity, or like there is some demonstrable value to you as a person or to the world, or something like Tom's, the shoe brand, donates a pair of shoes for every shoe they sell or something like that. So you can buy those shoes and feel good. You know, they'll put some little distract and deflect sort of thing in there there's nothing. There's nothing convincing anybody that this is anything other than just like, I'll bet we can charge people to like half the price of the fucking base game to get them to play it 5 days early.
Yeah, I mean, it's
I'll bet we
kind of
can. Do you think we can?
too.
Yeah.
I feel like it's insidious too because I feel like there's probably a lot of people out there that are saying something like, well, just be patient, forehead, right? Like, don't play day one, which, fair enough, valid. That probably is in reality what you should do. But like from a cultural perspective or like a gaming culture perspective, right? Like, let's say the next Skyrim 2 comes out, because a lot of people like Skyrim. I personally would have said a different game, but we'll just say Skyrim 2. This like cultural, like this monolithic thing that's going to be a huge deal. And let's pretend it's actually going to be good, because I'm skeptical as to whether the next Elder Scrolls will be good. But like, let's say it's going to be great. Like, tons of people are going to be playing this game. Tons of your friends are going to be talking about it. And this is a single player experience, by the way. I'm not even talking about a game that's going to be multiplayer.
Yeah.
That alone, there's some kind of like magic and excitement behind playing a game with your friends day one, discovering everything with the world and the community and the internet. All of that. There's this magic about it, kind of. If you play, some of these delays are like a week long. Like, I think the Diablo one was 5 days early, which is functionally a week. People can come up with guides, spoilers, all this ridiculous content in the matter of 5 days, publish all of that, and like, you just lose so much of the magic, so much of the excitement, and it really does just like prey upon FOMO. Like,
it absolutely does. The idea of being left out of your friend group, and Bethesda is actually, even though it's never been to my experience the kind of game that I would communally love on with people, I have viewed other groups of friends just being absolutely enamored with these games. And so, okay, Fallout 4 comes out and a bunch of them are skipping class or not going to work or calling the day off or something like that to go play the game, so they can all get together and talk about it and play it together, maybe, and this and that and the other thing. If one of you just couldn't do that or wasn't going to do that, you're probably going to want to pay the convenience tax to play the game with your friends. And that sucks. And I think is a little bit predatory. The other thing is it's the spoilers, like you said, is a huge thing. But then something like Diablo, with the way that game works, I remember Diablo 3, there was a dude who literally died from just playing the game to the detriment of his own health. And I'm like, man, there's enough time so if people are going to play your games that ravenously, a week is a lot of time for them to make it not very fun for the other people.
Yeah. I mean, it's also just like if we think about it, right? Like, the cost of the game
is already prohibitive.
Well, it's like the WoW example is not really great, because the WoW example, like, each of the editions above the base edition also come with free game time. So there is like an actual, like, a month of WoW costs like $15. So that's kind of baked into like the deluxe edition. So I generally have an easier time like paying a higher amount, because I'm like, okay, I'm going to get game time in here. So I kind of take that out. Right. Even though that's still a marketing trick that I'm falling for, but whatever. Point being, is the amount that you pay over whatever the base game is really worth like the money? So I'm trying to think of like a clear example. There was the Forza Horizons example, which they talked about in one of the articles. I think it was the Digital Trends one, Aaron. And apparently the premium edition, which was $100, came with 4 days early access. And the scary thing about it is that it was actually really successful. So they were saying that like 800,000 people played in the early access period, which, by the way, for those that don't know, that's a very large amount of people for a game. That is a very healthy amount of people. So it's just crazy though, because like what's the base price for Forza Horizon? It was either $70 or $60. It's 60. I'm seeing 60 on Steam. So that's $40. $40 for 4-day early access. And I'm sure that they had some other things bundled in there too. But like, if you're buying that for the 4 days early access, you're basically paying $10 a day to play this game, which, like, I don't know. I mean, it's not a ton of money, but it's kind of like the base game's $60 and you can play it for however long you want. But then the first 4 days cost you $10 a day to play. Like, that's kind of weird.
Yeah. And to me, like I can see there being. So when I was very actively writing about video games, right, and attempting to review them, it's really, really hard to review a game when you buy it on release day like everybody else, right? Because by that point, the reviews have already been out for a long time. So doing that independently is pretty hard. I could see something like this being very appealing to me were it not for the fact that 800,000 other people would just be doing it. It's not an exclusive early access thing. It's not at all. It's just very, 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 very expensive midnight premiere of your favorite movie.
Well,
Except it's not even
like
that.
early. It's not even like early access from like that perspective either, because if we're talking about like review copies for a game, they're going to get it way before, well, assuming they get sent out in the right way and aren't sent like super short notice to avoid bad reviews coming out and all that jazz. They're going to get it way before that 4-day period because that's considered like the public launch date.
Yeah.
They're not considering that an actual early access period. Like, they might be in the sense of like if it's a multiplayer game and they're not going to make as many servers active because they don't think there's going to be as many people playing. But like, it's not like you're a reviewer. You're not getting special access. This is access that everyone can get if they pay.
Like, what it is a parking lot with a couple of special space, but every space can be special. It's a parking lot. But this is a stretched metaphor, and I'm really going to try and make it work. It's like a public parking lot, but you go and you pay to park for X amount of time, but it's $5 for a spot. That's very affordable parking. Or if you want to get a gold spot, it costs $15. That's actually a very busted metaphor because it'd be more like $8 or $9, and all they really do is come and put a little crown on your parking spot.
Well, I feel like it's more like if you had a parking lot where you basically went there and you're like, okay, I saw that you have parking spaces available. Like, I see that parking space right in front of me. Like, I see it's available right now. Can I pay for that parking spot? And they're like, no, you can't pay for that you can't have that parking spot right now. No one has that parking spot.
Yeah.
It is available, but in order to use that parking spot right now, you need to pay me money. Early.
You need to pay.
You can have that parking spot in a
yeah.
week, but not right now. Right now, it's available and like it's in good shape. A car could park there right now, but you can't have it for another week because you need to pay to use it now.
Thank you for saving my story. Thank you for saving my metaphor. That was actually much better. No, that is what that's like, and it's just bewildering, and I could fall down into the hole of just crapping on this as a practice, and to be honest with you, that would be kind of cathartic. But I feel like relentlessly dogging on this.
Well, here, I mean, I think the important thing, not to cut you off, but because we do have the actual Steam Early Access thing to talk about, I think the, like, reason we're bitching and moaning about this so much and why it's important is with the, like, Forza Horizons example with the 800 people that bought into that early access period, that just illustrates that it works.
Yeah.
And it might be stupid, it might be marketing, but it's good marketing that clearly works on people, and it's just getting more and more prevalent. I think that one article that we found said that there were 10 games last year that came out and took advantage of this, and sadly one of them was Baldur's Gate 3 on PS5, which I was honestly really disappointed, if I'm being honest, that they did that. But it's my concern looking forward is this is just going to happen more and more because people are seeing that it is an easy way to make money, and it helps make up for the fact that everyone's saying, don't pre-order a game, don't pre-order a game. But people don't want to wait, and they don't want to have to worry about not being able to play a game when all of their friends play. FOMO is just super powerful, and they're weaponizing it and artificially, like, manipulating release dates and whatnot.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the idea of a release date is just bullshit now. I don't even know what a release date specifically means anymore. Like what is the actual on? It's now proprietary terminology. Yep. Whatever they want it to mean is exactly what it means. It is no longer a definable thing outside of corporate jargon. And yeah, it's just exploitative, but so visibly lazy that it's just frustrating. But yep, it's gonna be everywhere, even more so than it already is. It's not relegated to your usual suspects like EA, because again, the Baldur's Gate 3 situation shows that studios that very conveniently will come back up again in our little talk about like actual early access and some of the pros and cons there, because good God, there's a lot. Larian still went with this. The publisher for that game still went with this. So it's not like even these super community friendly developers are necessarily immune to this sort of thing. So this is less of a how can we change it and what can we do sort of thing for me, and more of a, well, we're watching it happen. Might as well complain a little bit because damn, I mean, we didn't stop pre-orders by not pre-ordering. This is 2024. We're going to see this with almost every AAA release, I'd be willing to bet.
Pay early to play our shit game that doesn't run well. Is what's gonna basically end up.
It's
being
a compelling argument.
Yeah, if you promise me it runs like shit, I'll definitely play it early. Yeah. So it's a mess. We've dogpiled on it now for a little over 30 minutes, I'm sure, or maybe a little under. Whatever. My point being, on to bigger and better things, at least from my perspective, which is to say, early access games. To your point, talking about Larian, they're a really easy kind of transitional topic because obviously Baldur's Gate 3 was in early access for I actually don't remember the amount of time. I think it was like 2 years.
Yeah, it was like 2.5 years. So again, the brief ground level thing for someone who may not know early access. Basically, the developers and publishers charge ideally less than they would for the full asking price of a game to release a game to the public that is still a work of progress. So that's not to say that it shouldn't have compelling content worthy of its price tag, but the idea being that the community and the developers can almost collaborate on polishing and finishing the game and bringing it to its most complete state for its intended audience. In theory, it's a great idea for developers who maybe need both that community feedback and a little shot in the arm of capital right at the, last push of a big project, or right at the halfway point of a big project or something. But in reality, it can get a little hairier. But Larian is, to Zach's point, a phenomenal example of how to use that system to an incredible effect.
Yeah, so I just double checked. It looks like it went into early access on in October of 2020. And then obviously came out in August of 2023. So definitely over 2 years. It was in a partial playable state for a pretty long period of time. And as Aaron was alluding to, my understanding, I don't know if this is true because, and I'm too lazy to look this up now, but it would make sense that this was the case, even if I'm mistaken about Act 3. But I don't think Act 3 of the game was in early access ever. I believe that was never put into early access. That was only in the final release. I could be wrong with that. But I know Act 1, even though it may have changed, was definitely in early access. And if you play Baldur's Gate, which Aaron and I have, Act 1 is really well done. I think the pacing of it's really well done. There's tons of content. It's very, very interesting. My understanding is a lot of people have issues with Act 3. So where I'm going with this is I think early access really helped that team craft and like hone in on success when it comes to like the beginning of the game, in the middle of the game. And they really did a good job of like making sure everything felt right and iterated on things that players were interested in them iterating on, to real like spectacular effect with this game. And that, like you said, Aaron, is one of the big benefits of early access, is the ability to kind of develop with your literal community in some ways. Now, obviously, you're not going to take everything your community says in mind and like change, but it definitely helps you like tweak things and see how players are actually playing the game while also making some money from it, which can be super helpful.
Yeah, if if the stars align in that situation around the time that your game may be running out of money, is a great time to hopefully have it in a good enough state that people can play it, and then you're still like your development costs can be covered for a while longer by still continuing to work on the game. That as a release structure theoretically is a game changer for studios that don't have bottomless pockets.
Well, I think the one kind of neat thing too, I saw an article, or one of these articles that we had a comment that I didn't agree with. So PC Gamer had this article, Aaron. It was saying that there are reports that state that early access games on average are more expensive than full release games. Actually, now that I'm rereading this, it's unclear to me whether they mean that from the consumer side, like you're paying more to play the game, or if they mean like development-wise, it's more expensive. So unclear there. I will say, if they are talking about from the consumer side, I've seen it the opposite, and that's even referenced in a bunch of different articles that I was looking at. One of the big benefits that typically happens with early access games is that you actually pay a little bit less because you're not buying the game at full release.
Yeah.
So I can't think of any examples. I buy a lot of early access games. I actually really like early access games because I think a lot of the time they tend to be a little bit more like unique and inventive. But I'm pretty sure I've gotten some of them a little bit cheaper than they were when they came out full release. So that can be one of the benefits there. I personally think it's kind of cool to play the game as it's getting developed and iterated on. I will say sometimes you'll get an early access game and it's like not fully baked. Like you get the idea of what they want to do, but it's not really enough of a game. So you're kind of there like, was it worth the money? So I definitely understand like some of the issues that people have, because technically with early access, like once you buy the game from the developer, they don't have to finish developing the game.
Yeah, there's no contract.
Yeah, exactly. And that's like when you're reading a lot of the negatives of this, Aaron, at least what I was seeing, that was the majority of what people were saying is like, or I literally, one of my buddies in the car, I was talking to him about us doing this episode, and he said he didn't like early access because he felt like there was no accountability from the developer if you give them the money. Like them wanting to get money eventually is, what pushes them to do better and better and better. And I definitely agree if we're looking at it as like a very like the world is shit and everyone's an asshole kind of way. But I honestly haven't been burned by it too much.
It's kind of the argument of like, should you like what would change if you tipped wait staff at the beginning of a meal versus at the end?
Yeah.
It's like, I don't know. I think that just depends so much on it. There's no reality in which someone doesn't try and run a scam, right? So you can look at Steam, you can look at the Switch eShop and just see mountains of dreck, just borderline unplayable, irredeemable pieces of garbage that clearly weren't made. Like, I'll give a free pass to the games that go up there for, 60 cents that were made by like some kid somewhere and they published their game and they felt really cool about it, and it's obviously not very good because it was their first game and whatever. Like, that's fine, that's great. But there's some game that was pumped out by, at this point now, probably just AI, that has absolutely no redeeming qualities and is barely a game and barely runs. That's going to be on Steam no matter what. And so the fact that games like that are trickling into early access as well, the only frustrating thing there is people defending those crap games by saying, well, you don't know how much better it's going to get. There's very, very little doubt about some of these games and their developers' intentions to actually support them. But when, like you said, when done correctly, I think even if a game doesn't fully come to fruition, if you're someone who's interested in the development process, at least being, in on something like that is interesting. But all in all, I think conceptually the good outweighs the bad in early access. That's my takeaway. And I know it's actually a much more contentious subject than I had originally thought.
Yeah, well, I think, and I hate to kind of say this to a degree, but I was kind of thinking about it, and maybe I've just got like a really good radar for what games are going to be bad and which are going to be like good. But I feel like part of it's kind of on you. Like to a degree, you could say it's on Steam as a platform not allow, this to happen and people to be manipulated and da-da-da-da-da. And I do think in a perfect world that would be it. But like, I think the right way to think about early access is you should buy the game that you expect to play now. Like the game as it is now, right? Don't buy the game for the state it'll be in the future. Watch videos of the game, look up reviews of the game in early access. If it looks good based on the state that it's in now, I would say there's a better chance that you will not regret your choice. For example, I got Valheim early access. I even got this like really kind of crappy dinosaur survival game that I love called The Isle, which I don't recommend to anyone. It's a bad game, but I love it. And like, but I knew what I was getting into. Like I watched enough stuff for both of those to know what to expect. And like, then I bought the game. I think even then though, there is some risk. Like what if they massively change the game and it was like, for example, like Stellaris, which has been released for a long time, but they've literally made some monumental changes to the game. So it's barely similar to like when I played it last.
Yeah.
Like there is the risk of that happening, but I don't see that very often that people make these massive pivots like that in game design for early access. So like, I don't know. I mean, part of it, just be smart. Like just buy the game as it is now. Don't buy this aspirational project that could or could not happen.
Ultimately, I think there's two different ways to look at it. One is in terms of purchasing a product, and the other is in terms of investing in a product, right? So think of early access investment as like a Kickstarter situation where you say, okay, I like what I've seen, and I think it will look better. I'm going to take a blind leap of faith on this project and purchase it. Be very careful about that, because a lot of those games are not going to do it. But again, like you said, if it looks, let me put it this way, if they're selling it for early access, if it looks like you will have $30 of fun with it, and it costs $30, pay $30 for it, have $30 worth of fun with it, and if it turns into something that you play for a really long time, then consider yourself lucky you got it on the ground floor, I guess. I don't know. I think the argument is also very similar in a lot of ways to like the violent content in video games, the ESRB thing, where I say so much of that is on parents, not necessarily on the ESRB. The ESRB can tell you exactly what's in the game, and if you don't read the label, you don't get to be mad about the fact that it was in the game. It was clearly rated M. In this, it's clearly untested. It's clearly unfinished. You are gambling when you put your money into it, ultimately. And that's not to excuse any of the scammers, to be sure. But it really does seem like a much more avoidable sort of thing.
I think it's interesting because you mentioned Kickstarter and all that. I think the way that you have to treat the two things, like you were kind of alluding to, like it's fundamentally different. Like one is, like you said, you're functionally an investor and you're investing in something that you think's a good idea. So that literally is you investing in an idea. I do not treat early access the same. Like I said, I think the smart way to do it is just look at the game now. In fairness, I don't really know if a lot of people get like an early access game because they just believe in the project. I mean, maybe that is a thing that they do. But I don't know. I wouldn't trust it that way, especially on Steam. I think you're just going to have better luck with that on like not a GoFundMe, but like, yeah, Kickstarter. I think the culture there of what you put up is maybe a little bit better.
Yeah,
At
I
least
think
if
I think the expectation in Kickstarter a lot of the time is that in order to, you can't rely on your Kickstarter project being fun. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
what's that game that everyone's freaking out about right now? That was early. It's early access. It's like the horror
Lethal
squads one.
Company, is that the one?
Lethal Company, yeah.
Yeah.
So like, if Lethal Company wasn't fun, people wouldn't be playing it, right? So that game will make a shit ton of money in its early access phase because people want to play the game as it stands. Kickstarter is purely a leap of faith, so in order to engender that kind of confidence, you know, the pitch has to be pretty compelling. And generally, I think they hold you pretty accountable if you don't deliver on anything. But well, maybe not now that I think of it. But I don't know.
Yeah, I mean,
they're just different.
I just think you should treat them differently is my thing. I understand people when they're like, these two systems have issues and are functionally the same thing. And I wouldn't argue that they're not. I just think you have, like, I think you have to have a different framework when you're looking at an early access game is not an investment. I mean, technically neither is a Kickstarter, but you know,
right.
Yeah.
You're paying to. The thing is, with a Kickstarter, you're technically paying to bypass some sort of system in order to get content you specifically like made, right?
Yeah.
With early access, it's not even that. It's not that. It's
Yeah, I mean, it certainly has its issues. The one thing I'd be really curious to see a new number on, Aaron, is the number of released early access games, because the one number we got, the only number we could find was that 25% early access game, or 25% of early access games have made it to full release. But that number was from 2014. And then I'm pretty sure the program started in 2013. So it's like, that's in my mind, that's not really enough time to like give us a good number to go by today.
No,
but
we're looking at a decade worth of change.
Yeah, well, exactly. Although I will say that there was an article that I saw that said that there are 7,000 early access games on Steam as of 2023. And I mean, that's a lot. That's a lot of games. I wouldn't be surprised if it is under 50% that ever reach full access just because of the program and the way it is. But like, I don't know, 25. I mean, maybe that's the right number. It seems kind of low, but
I was going to say, to be honest with you, again, taking those decade-old numbers as just kind of a loose framework for what was going on back then, I actually wouldn't be surprised if the rate had dropped. And we're talking about this speculatively because obviously, Zach, you and I, we couldn't fucking find newer numbers than 2014. Someone did a study on this in 2014 and no one's bothered to do one since that we've been able to find.
Which is bizarre to me that they don't.
Yeah,
I'm surprised Steam doesn't publish those numbers. I feel like they'd want to have that out about the program.
Unless the numbers are real fucking low.
Yeah, well, maybe that's why. I was about to say maybe they're not publishing it because they are so low that they think it looks bad. But I still think regardless, like, it's the program has brought us so many good games that even if the majority of them were shit, I feel like the good ones make up for it.
Well,
because you have like Don't Starve, Valheim, Hades, Baldur's Gate. I don't have a list in front of me right now. Those are just ones I know off the top of my head. But.
The magnitude of the successes drowns out the noise of the failures.
Yeah.
But
those are great games. Like every single game that I just listed, I would say is a great game. So I still think it makes up for the shit. But I also haven't lost a bunch of money
Yeah, that's totally fair. I think ultimately it boils down to the majority of content, especially in the era in which we live. The majority of content is bad, right?
So, way to be an optimist, Aaron. Jesus.
No, I'm being serious. Like the majority of content, I'm not saying everything's terrible. I'm not saying everything that comes out of a studio is terrible.
But you're right.
Saying,
I mean, just look at YouTube videos.
Yeah,
movies,
by and large, TikTok
TV.
has accelerated the pace of content creation to an unstoppable rate, and most of it is bad. YouTube, most of it is bad. You can have a whole conversation about what you think about TV and streaming services and the way that those have changed. Most of the content is at best forgettable. On those professional services and on crowdsourced stuff, most of it's just outright bad. Since Steam's platform allows for people to be putting their stuff up with a fairly low barrier to entry, it stands to reason that scammers are going to slip in, inexperienced developers are going to shoot a shot way above their class and fall flat on their face, or that. But I really think that part of that just comes with the market right now. Do I think that that's where the payment issue comes in as well? Yeah, I do. But I also still think that the onus is more so on us to look at a project and go, well, that ain't worth money, than it is on the concept of early access, which has proven to be a useful tool when used appropriately and properly.
I feel like it's a situation of like, would Steam developing the tools be worth their time and provide a better service to developers and customers? I don't really know the answer to that. My gut feeling is it's maybe not worth their time right now to focus on that. Maybe if this was like a much bigger story, it would be a bit of a problem.
I think if, sorry to cut you off, but just to addendum that, I think that if there was a significant enough pushback against early access as like a downfall moment, or even like culturally, oh, they're doing that in early access, then I don't think Baldur's Gate 3 probably would have. I mean, if it did before, Baldur's Gate 3 wiped that out of people's mouths.
Yeah. I mean, it's like what you're saying. I just wonder if the regulation that would be put in place. Listen to me complaining about regulation as someone that's a socialist and generally think regulation's good. I just wonder if putting those additional rules in place would actually hinder some smaller developers from coming out with really cool content. I don't know. Maybe it really wouldn't do anything at all. I'm not going to claim like I have an answer. I don't have an issue with early access, if I'm being honest. I think it's exactly what you said about media in general. Media is massively easier to make and manufacture now than it used to be. As a result, more people are going to do it, and there's going to be more crap. I mean, we're not a big podcast, but just to like put it in perspective, you already know this because I've talked to you about this, but I think this is always like a super interesting point for people that don't know. So we're not a very big podcast. I don't think, Aaron, we give a shit about sharing what numbers typically we pull in. It's like, I don't know, 30, 40 views per episode, actually a little less than that per episode, whatever. Sometimes it goes up depending on older episodes, da-di-da-di-da. My point being is like, we're not pulling in thousands of views. Last time I looked, I don't remember what website it was, Aaron, but we were in like the top 10% of podcasts. We may have actually been in the top 5%.
I think we were within the top 5%.
Yeah, like top 5% of podcasts based on viewership. And we are not pulling in crazy numbers. That just illustrates that there are, and I want to illustrate this because I'm not saying we're the best. I'm not saying we deserve to be in the top 5%, but what I am saying, like I'm being very broad in saying this. Viewership doesn't necessarily mean quality, but if we are associating those two things, and like I said, that doesn't technically matter, there's a lot of not great podcasts out there. Some of them could be getting tons of viewers, but I'm more just illustrating like the vast quantity of podcasts out there. It's crazy. Like I just think that illustrates. Same thing with Twitch. Like Twitch, I think if you get 100 views on average, you're in the top like 3%.
Yeah, because like, the actual volume of stuff has scaled to a point where, honestly, it's almost to the point where if you're even doing it regularly, you've already bested the odds. I'd be willing to bet that a lot of those podcasts are dormant, right? So I think it stands to reason that more dreck is going to come up. In a lot of ways, corners of Steam remind me of the older internet, where you could find stuff, and you kind of had to have your head on straight in order to know where you were going and what you were looking at, and you still do. But Steam's content moderation policies are such that you do need to be careful with what you're spending your money on. And, we could have a conversation about misleading marketing. We could have a conversation about abusing these tools and whatnot. But I don't think that the blame for the problems with early access games can be laid at the feet of the structure of early access as a concept. Whereas I think pay to play early, just to kind of put a bow on that, is just irredeemable garbage. There's no pros in that situation unless you're a publisher.
Well. I mean, you might benefit if you're the studio, but the pros are on or around whether or not you get your pre-orders in. Like it's just guaranteeing that you kind of know how many people you're going to bring in, and there are benefits to that, but it's not the same kind of development benefits that you get from early access, and there's not any real added value to the consumer.
Except for missing, you get to jump right over that FOMO.
Yeah, exactly. So, yeah, I mean, I think at this point, in terms of topics, just kind of looking through everything, Aaron, I don't know that I have a ton to say, but if you have any additional closing salvos for everybody before we get into the thank yous.
Nah. I don't think I really have any closing salvos, except I guess this is almost a pedestrian conversation because it's just another marketing gimmick. We're going to see it more, and it's not going to change anything because people are still going to do it. Some of us aren't. But I'll bet you dollars to donuts that when your favorite next game has that thing on it, you'll at least think about it, because I bet I will. And then I'll have to shake my head and say they got me. But I think ultimately, as with anything, just keep your head on straight. If it really is worth it to you to play it early, and it doesn't matter that you're playing into the game, then you know what? More power to you. Spend the extra money. I'm not here to tell you how to use your wallet, but don't throw the baby out with the bathwater insofar as normal early access goes. I guess that's my kind of thought. But at the risk of turning this all into one long sentence or just talking way too much in general, I think since we are on our way out and it's been too long, it's been so long since we've outroed an episode now. Well, realistically, it hasn't, but in the context of the show, we have gone a very long time without thanking some very special people. First off, Beach Girl, the purveyor of our fine music. You can find Beach Girl's grand tunes just about anywhere great virtual music can be located. Spotify, Bandcamp, SoundCloud, iTunes, Wax Cylinder, old player pianos, I think still, some of them. But yeah, that is Beach Girl. Also follow them on all of the social medias that you crave. Xnay Twitter, as I said before, and all that fun stuff. But definitely do listen to Beach Girl. Legitimately good music from a legitimately good person.
And I'm here to say you should check out eDougie Art. eDougie Art is a wonderful friend of ours who worked on the logo that we use and a lot of the other artistic things that are involved with our project here at the podcast. So just wanted to give a shout out to them. Make sure to check them out at eDougie Art on both Etsy and on Instagram. That's at eDougie Art. So thanks, Beach Girl. Thanks, eDougie. God, I am not articulating words well today. Thank you all for your help. We appreciate you. And to you, the dear listener, we appreciate you tuning in for season 3. Thanks for checking us out. Thanks for showing your support. And hopefully you're excited for some of the episodes we've got coming out.
Yep, we've got some fun stuff planned for the season ahead. And thank you for being along for the ride.
I bid you adieu.
Goodbye.
Anyway.